I was at work, half buried in emails and project deadlines, when my phone buzzed on the desk. Just another notification, or so I thought. But when I glanced at the screen, I saw her name, my wife. A message. No more kisses, no more intimacy. That was it. No context, no explanation. Just a statement of fact. At first I thought it was a joke, a cruel, dry joke, but still a joke. I even started typing a response, something like, haha, what's that supposed to mean? But before I hit send, something in my gut told me to stop. There was no humor in this. It was a declaration. I stared at the message, rereading it as if the words would change. They didn't. This wasn't a fight. There was no argument that had led up to this. In fact, our conversations lately had been nothing. Empty exchanges about dinner, work, and weekend plans that never actually happened. Still, this was final. This was an execution of something that had already been dying for a long time. I locked my phone and sat back in my chair, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this? Was this her way of saying she wanted a divorce? Was she seeing someone else? Or was she just done with me? A few minutes passed before I picked up my phone again and typed, "Is everything okay?" No response. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, then 30. Nothing. I checked the message status, delivered. She had read it. She just didn't care to reply. Something about that hit differently than the words she'd sent. She had made a decision. Not just about intimacy, but about me. And she didn't even think I was worth an explanation. I tried to work, but my focus was shot. I went through the motions, answered emails, made a few calls, but it was like watching someone else do my job from outside my own body. My mind was back home in that silent house where my wife had just drawn a line I hadn't seen coming. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside, dialing her number as I walked toward the parking lot. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. She was ignoring me. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, staring at the blank screen of my phone, waiting for a call or text that I knew wouldn't come. For months, I had felt her pulling away, but I had told myself it was stress, routine, life getting in the way. I had convinced myself that whatever distance had grown between us, we'd close it eventually. But this was her closing the door. And now I had a choice. I could beg for an answer, demand an explanation, or I could face the reality that whatever was left of our marriage had just been reduced to a single text message. By the time I pulled into the driveway that evening, I had gone over every possible scenario in my head. Maybe she was upset about something unrelated. Maybe this was just a way to get my attention. Or maybe, just maybe, she would be sitting inside, waiting to explain what that message really meant. I stepped out of the car and stood there for a moment, staring at the front door. Everything looked the same. The porch light flickered slightly, as it always did. The curtains in the living room were half closed, just like they had been that morning. It was strange how normal everything appeared when inside everything had already changed. I pushed the door open and stepped in. She was there, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand, scrolling like nothing had happened. The TV was on, playing some mindless show she wasn't even watching. She barely glanced up when I entered. No greeting, no acknowledgement, nothing. I set my keys on the table and took a deep breath. Okay, here we go. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Hey," she responded without looking up. That was it. I waited a beat, expecting her to say something else. Maybe an explanation, maybe an apology, maybe even just some forced small talk to ease the tension. But no, she just kept scrolling. I took a step closer. "So, do you want to talk about your text?" She sighed, an exaggerated, irritated sigh, and finally looked up. "What about it?" I felt my jaw tighten. "What about it?" "You said no more kisses, no more intimacy. That's not exactly a normal thing to text your husband in the middle of the day." She shrugged. "I meant what I said." Silence. She went back to her phone like the conversation was over. Like this was just another Tuesday. I stared at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. But nothing came. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on me. This was different from the distant behavior I had been noticing for months. This wasn't avoidance. This was indifference. And that was worse. I sat down on the chair across from her, forcing myself to stay calm. Why? She gave a half-hearted shrug, still not looking at me. I don't feel like it anymore. That was all. No remorse, no sadness. Just a detached statement, as if she was talking about a show she lost interest in. You don't feel like it anymore? I repeated, as if saying it out loud would somehow make it sound less absurd. She nodded. Yeah. I waited. That's it, I thought? That's all you have to say after years together? Something inside me snapped, but not in the way I expected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt in the way I should have been. I was just done. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Okay. That was my response. Just one word. She glanced up at me then, almost surprised, like she had expected me to argue, to beg, to demand some kind of fight. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. She wanted to be done. Fine. I stood up and walked past her, heading toward our bedroom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't curse or yell. I just stepped inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the suitcase in the corner of the closet. I wasn't sure if I was packing yet, but for the first time I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't staying. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like an eternity, staring at the half-zipped suitcase in the closet. I wasn't packing yet, but the thought of leaving had taken root in my mind. It wasn't just a reaction to her message, or the indifference she had shown. It was the realization that I had been fighting for something she had already let go of. And the house was silent except for the low hum of the TV in the living room. She hadn't followed me, hadn't asked if I was okay, hadn't cared enough to wonder what I was thinking. I wasn't going to let this end with a text message and a shrug. I stood up, walked back into the living room, and planted myself in front of the TV. She didn't look up right away, but when she did, her face was unreadable. No guilt, no anger, just mild annoyance, like I was interrupting her evening. We're going to talk, I said, my voice firm but controlled. She sighed, setting her phone down on the armrest. About what? I almost laughed. About what? I crossed my arms. You don't think you owe me an explanation? She leaned back against the couch, looking at me like I was making a big deal out of nothing. I already told you. I don't feel like it anymore. That's not an explanation, I shot back. That's an excuse or She rolled her eyes. What do you want me to say? I took a slow breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. I want the truth. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering whether or not she was willing to give me that. Finally, she said, the truth is, I don't love you the way I used to. I don't feel the same. I don't want the same things anymore. There it was. The words were calm, almost rehearsed, like she had already come to terms with them long before saying them out loud. I waited for something more, some glimpse of hesitation or remorse, some sign that she regretted how this was playing out. But there was nothing. I took a step back, nodding to myself. All right. She raised an eyebrow. That's it? What else is there? I asked. You're done. You checked out a long time ago. You're just now letting me know. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just looked away, reaching for her phone again. That was it. No fight, no shouting, no tears, just silence. A confrontation requires two people willing to engage. But there was no confrontation here. Only an ending that had already been decided. I turned around and walked away. Not because I was giving up, but because I finally understood. There was nothing left to fight for. I walked back to the bedroom, shutting the door behind me, not slamming it, not making a scene, just closing it with finality. If she didn't care enough to fight for this, then neither did I. I sat on the bed staring at nothing in particular, my mind blank. I was just done. But then something nagged at me, a whisper in the back of my mind, a feeling I had ignored for too long. Her indifference hadn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't something that happened overnight. People don't just wake up one day and decide their marriage is over. Something had changed, and I needed to know what. I grabbed my phone, hesitated for a second, then opened our phone bill. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. Scrolling through the call log, I looked for anything unusual. It didn't take long. A number I didn't recognize appeared again and again, late at night, early in the morning. During lunch breaks, I copied the number and pasted it into a search bar. No name came up, just a generic carrier listing. For a moment, I debated calling it. Instead, I checked our shared location history. We had linked our accounts years ago, back when we actually cared about each other's whereabouts. I hadn't thought about it in ages. I pulled up the timeline, and there it was. Hotel, bar, a random apartment complex across town. It wasn't just one or two times. It was frequent. I sat back, phone in hand, feeling nothing at first. Just a quiet kind of certainty, like solving a puzzle and realizing the picture was exactly what you expected. I should have been furious. I should have stormed into the living room and demanded answers. I should have thrown my phone at the wall or screamed or something, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled down my suitcase. This time, I wasn't just staring at it. I was packing. Every piece of clothing I grabbed, every item I tossed into the bag, felt like cutting another thread that had been holding me here. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I wasn't staying. Halfway through, I heard footsteps behind me. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" I zipped up the suitcase. "Leaving." Her expression barely changed. Maybe a flicker of surprise, but not enough to mean anything. "So that's it?" she asked, voice flat. I turned to face her. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She didn't deny it, didn't ask what I knew, didn't try to explain. Because she knew, and so did I. I pulled the suitcase off the bed, the zipper humming as I secured the last of my things. My movements were steady, controlled. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I wasn't going to ask questions. I wasn't going to demand an explanation she had no intention of giving. She stood in the doorway, arms still crossed, watching me, not stopping me, not pleading, just watching. "You're really doing this?" she asked. I didn't look up. "Yeah." She let out a slow breath, but there was no real emotion behind it. No regret, no sadness. Maybe a little surprise, like she had expected me to just accept everything, to keep existing in that empty, meaningless space she had forced our marriage into. I grabbed my jacket off the chair and slung it over my arm. When I finally met her eyes, I saw it clearly. She had already moved on. That realization should have hurt. Maybe months ago, it would have. But now it just made things easier. I walked past her, dragging my suitcase behind me. The wheels hummed softly against the hardwood floor. She didn't step aside. I had to move around her. When I reached the front door, I stopped. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to take one last look at what I was leaving behind. The house was the same furniture, the same decorations, the same faint scent of lavender from the air freshener she always used. But it wasn't ours anymore. I turned the knob. "Where are you going?" she asked. The question almost made me laugh, as if it mattered to her, as if she actually cared. I didn't answer. I just pulled the door open and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the distant sounds of cars passing by, of neighbors going about their evening. The world kept moving, indifferent to the fact that my life had just taken a sharp, irreversible turn. I reached my car and threw the suitcase into the trunk. When I turned back toward the house, she was still standing in the doorway. For a brief second, I thought she might say something, anything to stop me. A half-hearted apology, a weak excuse, some final attempt at salvaging whatever was left. But she didn't. She just stood there, and that told me everything I needed to know. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway without another word. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I drove for miles without a destination, just letting the road stretch out in front of me. Streetlights blurred past, the hum of the tires against the pavement filling the silence. My phone buzzed a few times in the cup holder, but I ignored it. I already knew it wasn't her. She wasn't going to call. She wasn't going to ask me to come back, and I wasn't going to wait for her to. At some point, I pulled into a gas station, more out of habit than necessity. I stepped out, inhaling the cool night air, and leaned against the car. A couple of truckers were parked off to the side. A group of teenagers loitered near the convenience store entrance, but I barely registered any of it. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts. My thumb hovered over her name. I wasn't sure why. I wasn't tempted to call. There was nothing left to say. Maybe I was just acknowledging the finality of it, the way a name on a screen used to mean something, and now it was just another entry I no longer needed. With a few taps, I deleted it. Her number, our text history, every message, every call log, gone. The moment felt small, insignificant even. But it wasn't. It was mine. I got back in the car and started driving again. No plan, no GPS, just forward. Hours later, I checked into a hotel off the highway. The room was basic, a bed, a desk, a window overlooking the parking lot. It didn't matter. It was just a place to stop. A place that wasn't hers. I set my suitcase down, sat on the bed, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. There was no anger in me, no sadness, no regret. Just a quiet acceptance that this was the way things were always meant to end. She had made her choice, and now I had made mine. Tomorrow I'd figure out the logistics, where I was going, what came next. But tonight I didn't need answers. Tonight I was free. The morning after I left, I woke up in that cheap hotel room with a strange sense of clarity. There was no confusion, no hesitation about what needed to be done. The marriage was over. There was no saving it, no dragging it out with pointless conversations or forced reconciliation. I needed to make it official. First, I gathered the evidence. I already had the phone records, the suspicious locations, and the late-night calls. That was enough to confirm my suspicions, but I wanted proof, something undeniable. I reached out to a lawyer and after a short consultation, hired a private investigator. It didn't take long for him to deliver. Within a few days, I had photos, timestamps, and documented proof that my wife had been seeing someone else. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry anymore. I filed for divorce immediately. The lawyer assured me that, with the evidence of infidelity, I had leverage. I wasn't looking for revenge. I just wanted to make sure I got out of this with what was rightfully mine. When she was served with the divorce papers, her reaction was exactly what I expected. Cold indifference. No tears, no begging, no attempt to explain. She signed them with barely a second glance. The only time she spoke about it was to ask when I'd be moving my things out. I returned to the house one last time, not to talk, not to negotiate, just to take what was mine. The moment I stepped inside, I realized something. I felt nothing. The house, the furniture, the life we had built together. It was all just a collection of things that no longer had meaning. She watched as I packed, didn't offer to help, didn't try to stop me. I left my keys on the counter, walked out the door, and never looked back. The divorce was finalized within a few months. It was clean, efficient, and completely devoid of emotion. Just like our last few years together. I walked away with what I was entitled to, and more importantly, I walked away with my freedom. And that was the real victory. I didn't waste time dwelling on the past. There was no point in wondering what went wrong or trying to piece together the exact moment our marriage had fallen apart. That chapter was closed. I built a new life, new place, new habits, new priorities. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy. No more guessing, no more waiting for someone to care. I had given her the space she asked for, and I had taken my own. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.